we now focus on Paul's second missionary journey. Now, I hope this is clear, but as we study Paul's second missionary journey, we find details of the journey from Acts chapters 15 to 18. And the timeline was from AD 49 to AD 52. And on this journey, it was Paul and Silas who traveled together. Now, what we understand is that Paul called Barnabas and he said, let's go and visit all the believers of the churches that we already planted, and let's encourage them. But Barnabas wanted to take John Mark with them. But Paul disagreed with taking John Mark because of John Mark's incompetency in the ministry. And so there was a sharp disagreement between Paul and Barnabas, which led to Paul taking Silas with him in this second missionary journey. And here is a list of places that they went to. So there are quite a few places here. So Syria, Cilicia, Derbe, Lystra, Troas, Macedonia, Berea, Athens, Corinth, Cenchrea, Ephesus, Caesarea, and then few other places, and then back to Antioch. Now, it's important to note that compared to the first missionary journey, this missionary journey was much longer. So, probably about 3 years. Now, coming to the important part of what happened in this missionary journey. So, there are quite a few things that happened, events that took place in this missionary journey. Firstly, obviously, Paul and Barnabas split as they were starting the journey over the coming of John Mark. And then, while they were on this journey, Paul and Silas, they met this fine young Timothy, and who was well spoken of by the believers in Lystra, it is. And so Paul found Timothy, took him and circumcised him because of the Jews, and Timothy's father was known as a Greek man. So they found Timothy, and Timothy joined them in the journey. Then while they are on this missionary journey, the apostles and the elders in Jerusalem were constantly sending reports to Paul and Silas about their decisions in Jerusalem. Then, very interesting that the Holy Spirit of God told Paul not to speak in Asia, Bithynia. So, sometimes God speaks to us and tells us not to go somewhere or not to speak somewhere. And that is what happened in this journey. And then Paul had a vision. There was a man calling him to go to Macedonia with the gospel. And then while they were ministering, they met a lady called Lydia, who was a purple cloth dealer, and she encouraged them, literally forced them to come and stay in her house. So that is how God takes care of missionaries. He brings people across in the journey, and He sends people to take care of them, the missionaries, and to provide for them. And then Jason, the young man who also helped Paul and Silas was attacked by the Jews. And then Paul himself was attacked in Berea by the Thessalonian Jews. And so Paul had to be sent to Athens. Now this is where Timothy and Silas stay, and Paul goes on to Athens. And then he starts debating with the Stoic and the Epicurean philosophers. And Paul talks about the unknown God. Of course, there was an altar there, and on it was engraved to an unknown God. And then in Corinth, later on as Paul moves to Corinth, he meets Aquila and Priscilla, who are also tent makers. And then eventually Silas and Timothy join Paul. And here there is a split from the synagogue and a new church is formed. So finally Paul's head is shaved because of a vow that he made. And then he goes to Ephesus, to Caesarea, and then to Jerusalem for the Feast of the Tabernacle. And then once the feast is observed, he goes back to Antioch. So, such an important second journey of Paul that we see here in Acts chapter 15 to 18. So, a much longer journey compared to the first journey, but it tells us how the Holy Spirit of God worked through these missionaries in the mission field and how the Lord